why did we create this redesign process? So what I'm going to go through during this webinar um, is Arcstone's process that we started kind of creating this process actually in the 90s. So for over 20 years, we've really been honing this process. We've used it through multiple redesigns from the same clients. So it basically involves sort of a 10-step process, evaluating your current site, creating your site structure and planning that, wireframing your pages, styling, working on content, doing full mockups, developing, testing, launching, and then measuring the success of the new site. So that's just really quickly kind of the 10 major pieces that we're going to go through. Like I said, feel free to put in questions anytime. It looks like from the poll, we have some fairly new sites, but one person says no one knows how old their site is. Okay, so that's definitely maybe time to think about a redesign then. So kind of quickly, some prerequisites. And we're not going to go into these things in too much depth to save time, but there are some things that it's extremely helpful for you to have set up for a redesign. One for sure is your personas. And this is sort of your communication personas, who you're ideally trying to speak to, and what's the language and the style that resonates with them and things like that. That will help a lot with writing and even design and even the photography you decide to use and all kinds of things. Your brand and style. So, how does your brand speak? What's the tone? What's the style of communication? Those kinds of things. Very solid branding, the colors, the fonts, the things you use, those are great to have ready for your redesign. And then kind of having your team and roles set up. And one thing about the team for working on a redesign project, I would highly recommend, if at all possible, kind of have one person sort of the approver, one person who is kind of on your team who has the authority to kind of approve things as you go through the process. That helps things go smoothly and quickly, and will keep your redesign project on schedule, basically. So now we're going to talk about some things you should think about and do to prepare for a redesign. A note about this webinar, I think this is the third or fourth time doing this, and every time they're a little bit different. So in this webinar, I have some updated examples, and also we're going to talk about, as part of preparation, thinking about calls to action. And we're going to think about how you redesign your new site to really drive user action. And kind of as we get close to the end of the year, everyone's trying to hit their fundraising budget or fundraising goals. They're trying to make their budgets. They're trying to hit their, volunteer goals. Calls to action and having a site that can drive action is very important. So we're going to cover more of that in this version of this webinar. So the big first thing when you're planning for the redesign is evaluate your current website, right? Take the lessons you've learned from your current website and apply them to the new one. And a note about this, a big part of evaluating your site is kind of doing a website audit, and an audit that's kind of geared towards the information you need for a redesign. There's going to be a new blog post I wrote coming out today, and it'll be linked in the follow-up email to this. And it's actually a very detailed guide on how to audit your website. So keep an eye out for that. Major parts of evaluating your current site are, of course, looking at your analytics and how you show up in search, right? So analytics, usually it's going to be Google Analytics and Google Search Console to kind of see how you show up in search engines. You want to look at that so you can get an idea of what is your popular content. What is content that maybe is not as popular? How do users flow through your site and find content? And then another big part of it is a UX review, evaluating the design and how your current design language is working on your current site for users. What are the things that are working and not? And then, of course, diving into your content and really taking a look at what needs to be updated, what is performing now and resonates with users now, and you want to bring that over to the new site. And we're going to go into content more later for sure. So on the analytics part of evaluating your current site, really pay attention to things like the top pages, right? What are the top most popular pages? What are pages that people are spending time on? What are the entrance pages? What are the pages that people are finding you organically in search engines on? And then hopefully you have some custom events and goals set up. Maybe you have a donation button, or you have a volunteer form, or you have things you want people to do on your site and you're tracking, that. Definitely pay attention to your goals, and what content is people, resonating with them. What are they reading before they complete some of those goals or actions? And like I said, the user flow through the site is very important. So for the UX, kind of looking at what on your current site now works and what doesn't, as far as the design and how people use the site. You're going to need something more than Google Analytics for that to kind of get a good idea. So this is just an example of one tool called Crazy Egg. And Crazy Egg does both heat mapping and scroll mapping. So that's mapping how users are using your site, what they're clicking on, what they're scrolling, how far they're scrolling down, the different interactions, things like that. Because remember, Google Analytics only tracks when a page is loaded, but if you have a map people are using, or videos, or they're pausing and stopping it, or if you have a donation button that goes off site, all of those you need another tool to track besides Google Analytics. And definitely you want to review the technical performance of your site and the accessibility. So many times my nonprofit clients are more and more concerned with accessibility. So as they look at a redesign project, they want to definitely correct maybe the current accessibility problems they have, or the mobile problems they might have. Typically, older sites aren't going to be as well functioning in the mobile devices. So this here is a screenshot again of Crazy Egg, but showing that it also separates its analysis of your site by mobile and desktop and tablet. So that's really nice if you have mobile users, but they seem to be struggling with a certain area of your site or using it. This is a tool that can kind of help you figure that out, what you need to improve maybe. So some organizational things. Another big part of redesigns many times is organizations evolve, things change. Maybe your mission has changed a little, you've added a new service. So really looking at your organization before the redesign project kicks off, and having a good idea of where you are now compared to your previous site is very important. So, do you have new objectives or services? Are the top items on your current site, are those still the top priority? As far as your navigation, do you have tweak to your mission? And also positioning, how you're positioned in the search engines and just in the market among your peers. Have you reevaluated what other people are doing with their websites? How does your design and branding reflect how you currently want to be positioned in the market and in on the internet? And do you have new goals? Were the past goals realistic? Did your past website help meet some of your organization goals, or do you have new things you want to try to do? So think about some of those things. And one of the other things, kind of the last thing to consider before you start your redesign project, is what is the feedback on your current website, right? I would do an internal and external user review of what people like about your current site, what they don't like. For internally, think about, leadership, but also those users kind of in the trenches. So leadership is going to kind of know what should the vision be like for the new website, the vision and the mission and stuff. But those sort of frontline workers who maybe have to field calls or emails because people can't find critical information on your site, or they get the complaints about it. You want to collect all that information to help you, build a better website. So there are tools you can use too. A lot of times people just manually talk to people and have a manual process, but there's this tool on the screen now is called Hotjar. And Hotjar does scroll mapping, heat mapping, just like Crazy Egg, but it goes a step further. It also does session recording. So you can actually see a whole recording of how a user interacted with your site, and if people are getting stumped on an area or can't find something, that's a good way to figure that out. It also can do little polls, little, thumb up, thumb down on a page, or was this page helpful, 1 to 10, things like that. This Hotjar tool does all of that. It's a little bit pricey, but they do offer nonprofit pricing. So I think you can get it for maybe half the price if you contact them about their nonprofit program. So let's go into first just kind of the different types of redesigns, because there are a few different sort of types of redesigns. Oh, a quick question. Someone says, what was that name? I assume you mean the name of the tool I just showed. That was called Hotjar, Hotjar, Hotjar. It's a very cool, very useful tool. If you put that on your current site, you can probably get a lot of interesting information about how your current site works. I'm going to switch this poll too. I have a bunch of different polls coming up. So here's one about if you've ever asked for feedback on your current site. So for types of redesigns, the one most common one people think of is sort of a full redesign. We're basically going to be scrapping the entire current website and doing a new design. So this is an example, the old sites in the background, the new sites in the foreground. And so that's, a complete overhaul. Many times, if say your branding has changed over the years, you have new branding, or say you want to move platforms from one content management system to a new one, or something like that. Many times, sort of the full redesign is definitely what you need to do for that, because you're making so many changes. So that's kind of the most common one. Sometimes, though, people do opt to do a partial redesign. So it may be that your website's not that old, but say you have a new program or a new big component to your mission, and you want to do a new homepage about it, or a new series of landing pages, or say you decided that you can serve your audience even better with a tweaked navigation. Maybe you're doing a new navigation. So the partial redesign is kind of about incremental improvements. Many times it's common with my nonprofit clients. They may be waiting for new budgets to come up, or they're waiting for the funds to maybe do something larger, but they have an immediate need. So we do this partial redesign. Another thing is kind of an expansion of your current website. So sometimes, a new website may be released in phases, so there's an expansion or a second phase to a redesign. That might be adding a new mission or service. It could be that there's a seasonal topical event or something seasonal coming up that you only need this section live certain parts of the year, or adding new resources. Many times, for this example here, we added a resource library to an existing site. So we did a redesign in a phase one, but part of another phase was launching this resources area.